The Zephyrian attack began at dawn on the second day. Their big ships moved toward the human colonies like hungry sharks swimming toward small fish. The aliens fired their plasma weapons, and bright beams of death shot across space. The first human outpost exploded in a ball of fire and metal. Admiral Kethvar watched from his command ship and smiled. This was going exactly as he expected, but the humans did not break and run like other species usually did. Instead, they fought back with everything they had. Their small ships darted between the big alien vessels like angry bees. They fired missiles and laser beams at the Zephyrian fleet. Most of their weapons did not hurt the alien ships very much, but they kept fighting anyway. Commander Paul Bennett was in charge of Outpost Gamma when the aliens attacked. Paul was a strong man who had been a soldier for 15 years. He had only 200 Marines to defend his base against 5,000 alien warriors. The smart thing to do would be to surrender. But Paul had never been very smart about giving up. The alien ships surrounded Outpost Gamma and demanded that Paul surrender. Paul sent back a message that used words his mother would not have liked. Then he told his Marines to get ready for the fight of their lives. The Marines checked their weapons and said goodbye to their families over the radio. They all knew they were probably going to die, but none of them wanted to live as slaves. The aliens landed outside the outpost in big metal ships. Their soldiers came out wearing heavy armor and carrying weapons that could melt through steel. The Zephyrian warriors were bigger and stronger than humans. They had been fighting wars for hundreds of years. They thought taking this small base would be easy. They were wrong. Paul had turned every hallway in his outpost into a trap. His Marines hid behind walls and in ceiling spaces. When the aliens came through the doors, the humans hit them with grenades and machine gun fire. The Zephyrians had better armor, but the humans knew their own base better. Every room became a small war. The fighting went on for 3 days. The aliens would take a room and then the humans would take it back. Bodies piled up in the corridors. The walls were covered with burn marks from laser fire. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of death. But still the humans kept fighting. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was working at Research Station Phoenix when the alien fleet arrived. Elena was a smart woman who studied different kinds of life forms. She had always wondered what aliens would look like. Now she was finding out in the worst possible way. When the Zephyrian ships attacked her station, Elena did not try to run. Instead, she used her scientific equipment to study the aliens. She watched how they moved and how they fought. She recorded everything she saw about their weapons and their ships. Elena knew this information could help Earth defend itself. Elena sent all her research back to Earth just before the aliens destroyed her station. Her message contained detailed information about Zephyrian biology and technology. She had discovered that the aliens were strong, but they had weak points too. This knowledge would prove very important later. The attack on Phoenix Station was over in 1 hour. Elena and her team died when the aliens blew up the research facility. But the information she sent to Earth survived. Her sacrifice gave humanity the first real look at their new enemy. Admiral Kethvar was getting frustrated. These human colonies should have fallen by now. In past wars, most species surrendered after losing their first battle. But these humans seemed to get more angry and more dangerous the longer they fought. Every victory cost the Zephyrians more ships and more soldiers. The worst part was how the humans fought. They did not stand in lines and shoot at each other like civilized warriors. Instead, they hid and used tricks and hit the aliens when they were not expecting it. They set traps and used their own exploding ships as weapons. They fought like wild animals that had been cornered. The human tactics were working too. Zephyrian casualties were much higher than expected. Ships that should have been able to destroy entire planets were being damaged by small human fighters. Elite alien soldiers were being killed by human Marines who should have been no match for them. Then something happened that made Admiral Kethvar very worried. The Zephyrian cruiser Void Render was chasing a group of human refugee ships trying to escape from one of the colonies. The cruiser was much faster than the human ships and had enough firepower to destroy them all. Captain Zektar reported that he was closing in on the refugees and would capture them soon. That was the last message anyone heard from Void Render. The big cruiser just disappeared. One moment it was there on the sensors chasing the human ships. The next moment it was gone. There was no explosion, no distress signal, no debris field. The ship and its crew of 3,000 warriors simply vanished into empty space. Admiral Keithvar sent other ships to look for Void Render, but they found nothing. The human refugee ships were gone too. It was like the whole chase had never happened. Kethvar told his officers that the cruiser probably had a technical problem and would show up soon. But deep in his mind, he was starting to worry. The Zephyrians had been conquering the galaxy for 800 years. They had destroyed thousands of worlds and enslaved millions of different creatures. Their technology was the best in known space. Their warriors were the strongest and most skilled fighters anyone had ever seen. But they had never fought humans before. Admiral Kethvar looked at the reports from the 3 human colonies. His forces were winning, but the cost was much higher than it should be. These primitives were supposed to bow down to Zephyrian might. Instead, they were making the mighty empire bleed for every small victory. The alien admiral decided to increase the attacks. He would use more ships and more soldiers. He would burn these colonies to ash and make an example that the whole galaxy would remember. But as he gave his orders, Kethvar felt something he had not felt in many years. For the first time since, he was a young warrior. He felt doubt. Maybe these humans were different from other species. Maybe this war would not be as easy as he thought. Admiral Kethvar pushed these thoughts out of his mind and focused on destroying the human colonies. He had a reputation to maintain and an empire to serve. The humans would fall just like all the others. They had to. What Admiral Kethvar did not know was that humanity had been getting ready for this day for many years. While the Zephyrians thought humans were primitive and weak, the truth was very different. Earth had been preparing for alien invasion since the first radio signals were sent into space. Director Sam Collins ran a secret organization called the Terran Defense Initiative. Sam was a quiet man who wore glasses and looked like he worked in an office. But behind his calm appearance was one of the smartest military minds humanity had ever produced. For 20 years, Sam had been building weapons and training soldiers for a war that might never come. Now that war was here. Deep under the mountains of Earth were hidden factories that built ships and weapons no alien had ever seen. Secret training. Bases prepared human soldiers to fight enemies from other worlds. Scientists worked day and night to develop new technologies that could give humans an advantage against superior alien forces. The most important project was called Ghost Fleet. Captain Maya Thompson was the first pilot to fly one of these new ships. Maya was a young woman with quick reflexes and nerves of steel. She had been chosen to test the prototype stealth frigate called Phantom. The Phantom was unlike any ship ever built. It was covered with special materials that made it invisible to most sensors. Its engines were silent and left no heat trail. Its weapons were designed to kill without making noise or light. Maya could fly right through an enemy fleet and they would never know she was there. Maya took the Phantom into the battle zone around the human colonies. She watched the Zephyrian ships attacking her people and felt anger burn in her chest. These aliens thought they could come to human space and kill innocent people. Maya was going to show them how wrong they were. The Phantom moved through the alien fleet like a ghost walking through a graveyard. Maya picked her targets carefully. She fired silent torpedoes at Zephyrian ships and watched them explode without warning. The aliens could not understand what was happening. Their ships were dying, and they could not see what was killing them. Maya destroyed 12 alien ships in her first attack run. Each time she fired, the Zephyrians tried to find her, but their sensors showed nothing. To them, it looked like their ships were just exploding for no reason. Fear began to spread through the alien fleet as captains reported mysterious attacks from invisible enemies. Lieutenant Commander Alex Parker was leading special operations behind enemy lines. Alex was a small man who could move very quietly and think very fast. He led a team of 20 soldiers who specialized in boarding enemy ships and taking them over from the inside. Alex and his team used captured Zephyrian technology to sneak onto alien vessels. They had studied the enemy for months and learned how their ships worked. The humans could move through Zephyrian ships without being detected because they looked like maintenance workers or junior crew members. Once inside an enemy ship, Alex's team would plant bombs or take control of important systems. They turned the aliens' own weapons against them. They made navigation computers give wrong directions. They caused life support systems to fail at critical moments. The Zephyrians never knew humans were on their ships until it was too late. The psychological warfare campaign was run by Colonel Beth Warren. Beth was an expert on alien psychology, who had spent years studying how different species thought and acted. She had discovered that Zephyrians were very confident fighters, but they had one big weakness. They were afraid of things they could not understand or control. Beth used this knowledge to create a campaign of terror against the alien fleet. Every time a Zephyrian ship disappeared, she made sure the other aliens heard about it. She sent fake radio messages that made it sound like the missing ships were still out there calling for help. She created stories about invisible human weapons that could strike anywhere at any time. The campaign worked better than Beth had hoped. Zephyrian crews began to get nervous and jumpy. They saw enemies in every shadow. They reported attacks that were not really happening. Some alien ships even fired on each other because their crews thought they were being attacked by invisible humans. Admiral Kethavar tried to keep his fleet calm, but it was getting harder every day. Ships kept disappearing without explanation. His best captains were reporting impossible attacks from enemies they could not see. The mighty Zephyrian fleet was starting to fall apart from fear and confusion. The worst part was that Kethavar could not figure out what was happening. His scientists checked all their sensors and found nothing wrong. His intelligence officers questioned captured humans, but learned nothing useful. The enemy seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Captain Tony Williams commanded a human defense platform near the second colony. Tony was an old soldier who had fought in many battles but never against aliens. His platform had big guns that were supposed to protect the colony from attack. But Tony knew his weapons were not strong enough to hurt the big alien ships. Instead of fighting the way the aliens expected, Tony used his platform as bait. He let Zephyrian ships get close, then activated a special device that jammed their sensors. While the aliens were blinded, human fighters would attack from all directions. By the time the aliens could see again, half their ships would be destroyed. Tony's tactics worked so well that other human commanders started copying them. Soon, Zephyrian ships were being ambushed every time they tried to attack a human position. The aliens had superior technology, but the humans were better at using tricks and strategy. Dr. Jennifer Clark was working with a team of scientists to study captured Zephyrian technology. Jennifer was a brilliant engineer who could understand how things worked just by looking at them. She discovered that alien shields had a weakness that could be exploited with the right frequency of attack. Jennifer's discovery led to the development of new human weapons that could punch through Zephyrian defenses. These weapons were quickly installed on human ships and used against the alien fleet. Suddenly, the invaders found that their best defense was useless against human attacks. As more Zephyrian ships disappeared, Admiral Kethavar realized he was facing an enemy unlike any he had ever fought before. These humans did not fight with honor like civilized species. They used stealth and tricks and psychological warfare. They turned the Zephyrians' own strengths against them. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethavar began to feel real fear. He was losing ships and soldiers to an enemy he could not see or understand. The proud Zephyrian fleet that had conquered hundreds of worlds was being picked apart by primitive humans who should have been easy to defeat. The hunter had become the hunted, and Admiral Kethavar did not know how to change it back. The space around the human colonies was quiet like it had been for many years. Stars shined their cold light on 3 small worlds where humans had built their homes far from Earth. These people worked hard every day to grow food and mine metals from the rocky planets. They thought they were safe so far away from the big wars that happened near Earth. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his small patrol ship called Independence. He was checking the empty space between the planets like he did every week. Jake was a calm man with gray hair who had been flying ships for 20 years. He liked the quiet times when nothing happened and he could just watch the stars. His ship was old, but it worked well enough to keep watch over the colonies. The morning started like any other morning. Jake drank his coffee and looked at his screens. Everything seemed normal. The 3 colonies were sending their usual signals. The mining ships were working. The farm stations were growing crops. Jake was about to turn his ship toward home when something strange appeared on his sensors. At first it looked like a small dot of light. Then the dot got bigger. Then it got much bigger. Jake rubbed his eyes and looked again. The dot was now the size of a small moon. His hands started to shake as he realized what he was seeing. This was not one ship. This was many ships. More ships than he had ever seen in his whole life. The alien fleet came out of hyperspace like a dark cloud blocking out the stars. There were thousands of ships, big ships and ships so huge they could hold entire cities inside them. Jake had never seen anything like it. The ships were black and covered with sharp points that looked like weapons. They moved in perfect lines like soldiers marching to war. Jake pressed the emergency button on his radio. His voice shook as he spoke into the microphone. He told Earth Command that a huge alien fleet had appeared near the colonies. He said there were at least 1,000 ships and maybe more. He asked for help, but he knew help was very far away. On the biggest alien ship, Admiral Kethavar stood looking at the human colonies through a large window. He was tall and had blue skin and 4 arms. His people were called the Zephyrians, and they had been conquering other worlds for 800 years. Kethavar had destroyed many planets and enslaved many different kinds of people. To him, humans were just another weak species that would soon bow down to his power. The Zephyrians had the best weapons in the galaxy. Their ships could travel faster than light. Their shields could stop any attack. Their soldiers were trained from birth to fight and kill. They had never lost a war. Every planet they visited either surrendered or got destroyed. Kethavar expected the humans to surrender quickly like all the others. Kethavar turned to his communication officer and told him to send a message to all the human worlds. The message was simple. The humans had 1 day to surrender completely. If they did not surrender, every human in the 3 colonies would die. Their cities would burn. Their people would become slaves. This was how the Zephyrians always did things. The message went out across all human radio channels. People in the colonies heard it and became very scared. Some wanted to run away. Others wanted to fight. Most just stood there not knowing what to do. They had heard stories about alien invasions, but they never thought it would happen to them. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter got Jake's emergency message. She was the head of Terra Command and one of the smartest military leaders humans had ever known. Lisa was a small woman with short brown hair, but everyone respected her because she was very good at her job. When she heard about the alien fleet, she did not panic. Instead, she called a meeting with all the other military leaders. The meeting was held in a secret room deep under the ground. Lisa told everyone what was happening at the colonies. She said the aliens were very strong and had many ships. The other leaders asked what they should do. Some wanted to send their own fleet to fight. Others thought they should try to talk to the aliens. Lisa listened to all their ideas, but she had her own plan. Meanwhile, General Rick Hayes was at his base preparing for something he had been expecting for a long time. Rick was a tough man who had fought in many wars. He had short gray hair and scars on his face from old battles. Rick had always believed that aliens would come to Earth someday. He had spent years getting ready for this moment. Rick sent a message back to the alien fleet. His message was very different from what the aliens expected. Most species begged for mercy or tried to make deals, but Rick's message was short and clear. He told the aliens they had entered human space without permission. He told them to leave now or they would learn why that was a big mistake. Admiral Kethavar laughed when he heard the human message. He had heard many brave words from many different species. They all said they would fight. They all said they were strong. But in the end, they all died or became slaves. Kethavar was sure the humans would be no different. The alien admiral looked out at the human colonies again. He saw their small ships and simple buildings. These humans looked weak and primitive. Their technology was hundreds of years behind Zephyrian science. Kethavar decided he would make an example of these colonies. He would show the whole galaxy what happened to species that did not respect Zephyrian power. But something was different about these humans. As the Zephyrian ships moved closer to the colonies, they noticed the humans were not running away. They were not sending desperate messages begging for mercy. Instead, the human ships were moving into attack positions. The colonies were powering up their defense systems. It looked like these primitive creatures actually planned to fight. Kethavar was surprised but not worried. Many species tried to fight at first. They learned quickly that fighting the Zephyrians was useless. He gave orders to his fleet commanders to begin the attack. Soon these humans would learn the same lesson that every other species had learned. The Zephyrian Empire always won. The breaking point came when Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived with the real human fleet. Kate was a tall woman, with steel-gray eyes who had been fighting wars since she was 20 years old. She commanded the Terran First Fleet from her flagship called Retribution. What Admiral Kethvar saw when Kate's fleet came out of hyperspace made his blood turn cold. There were not hundreds of human ships. There were thousands. More ships than Kethvar had ever seen in one place. Big battleships and fast cruisers and fighters that moved like schools of metal fish. The human fleet stretched across space like a wall of death coming toward the Zephyrian invaders. Kate had been hiding her fleet in the outer darkness waiting for the right moment to strike. While the aliens were busy attacking the colonies, the humans had been moving into position. Now they surrounded the Zephyrian fleet on all sides. The hunters had walked into a trap. Captain Chris Morgan led the first wave of human dreadnoughts against the alien battle line. Chris was a veteran captain who had commanded big ships for 15 years. His dreadnought was called Vengeance, and it carried weapons that could crack planets in half. The humans had built these ships in secret shipyards that the aliens never knew existed. The human dreadnoughts opened fire with weapons the Zephyrians had never seen before. Phase cannons that could punch through any shield. Quantum torpedoes that exploded inside enemy hulls. Plasma beams that melted alien armor like butter. The superior Zephyrian technology meant nothing against these new human weapons. Chris watched as his guns tore apart a Zephyrian battlecruiser that should have been able to destroy his ship easily. The alien vessel broke in half and exploded in a ball of fire. Other human ships were having the same success. The mighty Zephyrian fleet was being torn apart by weapons they did not understand. Major Julie Adams was the best cyber warfare specialist in the human military. Julie was a young woman who could make computers do things their builders never intended. She had spent months studying captured Zephyrian technology and learning how their systems worked. Now she was ready to use that knowledge. Julie connected her equipment to the Zephyrian fleet network through captured alien communication devices. Once she was inside their system, she began to cause chaos. Navigation computers started giving false readings that sent ships into asteroids. Weapons systems turned on friendly vessels. Communication arrays broadcast human propaganda directly into the minds of Zephyrian crews. The aliens tried to fight back against Julie's cyber attacks, but their computer experts had never faced anything like human creativity. Julie made their own ships turn against them. She caused life support failures and engine explosions. She even made some Zephyrian vessels play human music at full volume until the crews went crazy. But the most devastating weapon was something the Zephyrians had never encountered before. Fear. Real deep, terrible fear that ate at their minds like acid. The aliens had been winning wars for 800 years by being stronger and more advanced than their enemies. They had never faced opponents who were smarter and more ruthless than they were. Admiral Kethvar watched his perfect fleet fall apart around him. Ships that had conquered worlds were being destroyed by human vessels that should have been no match for them. His best captains were sending him reports that made no sense. Weapons that should not exist. Attacks that came from impossible directions. Technology that violated everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about warfare. The worst part was how the humans fought. They did not follow any rules of civilized combat. They used psychological warfare to drive alien crews insane. They turned captured technology against its makers. They hit the Zephyrians where they were weakest instead of where they were strongest. Commander Gary Peterson led a squadron of human fighters against a formation of alien interceptors. Gary was a pilot who had learned to fly by racing through asteroid fields for fun. The alien pilots were trained from birth to be perfect warriors, but they had never fought anyone who flew like Gary. Gary's fighters moved through space like they were dancing instead of fighting. They spun and rolled and changed direction in ways that made the alien pilots dizzy. The Zephyrians tried to target the human ships, but they could never predict where Gary would go next. Meanwhile, Gary and his pilots picked off the alien fighters one by one with precise shots. The battle became a slaughter. Human ships destroyed Zephyrian vessels at a rate of 10 to 1. The aliens who had come to conquer found themselves being conquered. Their superior numbers meant nothing when every human ship could destroy multiple alien vessels before being destroyed itself. Captain Roy Stone commanded the human battleship Justice during the final assault on the Zephyrian command ship. Roy was a calm man who never got excited even in the middle of battle. He guided his ship through the chaos of combat like he was taking a peaceful walk through a park. The Eternal Dominion was the biggest and most powerful ship in the Zephyrian fleet. Its shields could stop any attack and its weapons could destroy entire cities. Admiral Kethvar watched from the bridge as human ships swarmed around his flagship like angry wasps. He gave orders to fire all weapons, but the humans were too fast and too smart. Roy brought Justice alongside the alien flagship and fired everything he had. Phase cannons and quantum torpedoes and plasma beams all hit the Eternal Dominion at the same time. The mighty Zephyrian shields flickered and died. The thick alien armor cracked and melted. The ship that had been the pride of an empire was being torn apart by one human battleship. Admiral Kethvar felt something he had never felt before in his long military career: despair. His fleet was being destroyed. His empire's most advanced technology was useless against human weapons. The species he had thought were primitive had turned out to be the most dangerous enemy the Zephyrians had ever faced. The admiral looked around his bridge and saw the fear in his officers' eyes. These were warriors who had never known defeat. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved millions of creatures. But now they were being beaten by humans who fought with intelligence instead of just strength. Lieutenant Sharon Baker was monitoring alien communications from her post on the human command ship. Sharon spoke several alien languages and could understand what the Zephyrians were saying to each other. What she heard made her smile. The aliens were panicking. They were calling for reinforcements that would never come. They were asking for orders from commanders who were already dead. The Zephyrian fleet that had come to conquer human space was being completely destroyed. Not beaten in a fair fight, but torn apart by an enemy that refused to fight fair. The humans used every advantage they could find and created new advantages when they needed them. Admiral Kethvar realized that his people had made a terrible mistake. They had thought humans were weak because they looked primitive. But strength was not about having the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons. Real strength was about being smart enough to find a way to win no matter what. The humans had found a way to win. In the end, the Zephyrian Third Fleet simply stopped existing. Not destroyed in one big battle, but picked apart piece by piece until nothing was left. The aliens who had come to conquer human space found themselves being hunted by an enemy that was smarter and more ruthless than anything they had ever faced. Admiral Kethvar sat on the bridge of his dying flagship and watched his empire's greatest fleet disappear around him. Ships that had been there moments before were just gone. Some had been destroyed by human weapons. Others had been captured by boarding parties. A few had simply vanished into the darkness of space with no explanation at all. The admiral tried to send a message to the Zephyrian Empire, telling them what was happening. He wanted to warn his people about the humans. He wanted to tell them that these primitive creatures were actually the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But his communication systems had been taken over by human cyber warfare specialists. Lieutenant Danny Roberts was monitoring alien transmissions from his post on the deep space listening station called Deep Watch. Danny was a young man who had learned to speak Zephyrian by studying intercepted messages. He heard Admiral Kethvar's final transmission and recorded every word. The alien admiral's voice was full of fear and despair as he spoke into his radio. He said his fleet had come to conquer gods but had found devils instead. He begged whoever was listening to tell the Zephyrian Empire to stay away from human space. He said humans were not what they seemed, and that anyone who fought them would regret it. Then the transmission ended, and Admiral Kethvar's flagship exploded in a ball of fire. The most powerful ship in the Zephyrian fleet was destroyed by a single human torpedo that somehow got through all its defenses. The proud alien admiral died never understanding how creatures he thought were primitive had defeated the greatest military force in the galaxy. Colonel Nancy Pierce led the cleanup operations after the battle was over. Nancy was a careful woman who made sure every detail was handled correctly. Her job was to make sure no trace of the Zephyrian invasion remained. the humans collected alien technology and studied it. They gathered information about the Zephyrian Empire and its other fleets, but most importantly, they made sure nobody would ever know what had really happened to the Third Fleet. Nancy's teams destroyed all evidence of the battle. They cleaned up debris fields and erased sensor records. They even planted false information that would make it look like the Zephyrian fleet had been destroyed by some kind of natural disaster. The operation was so complete that within months it was like the Zephyrian invasion had never happened at all. The 3 human colonies rebuilt their damaged stations. The survivors went back to their normal lives. Children who had hidden in shelters during the battle grew up thinking it had all been just a bad dream. Captain Frank Lopez commanded a human ship that was hunting down the last few Zephyrian vessels trying to escape from the battle zone. Frank was a patient man who never gave up once he started tracking something. He followed the alien ships through asteroid fields and nebula clouds until he found them hiding near a dead planet. The Zephyrian crews surrendered without fighting when Frank's ship found them. They had seen what happened to the rest of their fleet and knew they had no chance against human forces. Frank took the aliens prisoner and sent them to secret facilities where they would be questioned about their empire and its plans. These prisoners were the only Zephyrians who survived the invasion of human space. They spent the rest of their lives in comfortable but secure facilities helping human scientists understand alien technology. Most of them eventually decided they preferred living with humans to going back to their own empire. Dr. Kevin Martinez was part of the team that studied, captured Zephyrian technology. Kevin was a brilliant scientist who could figure out how any machine worked just by taking it apart. He discovered that alien technology was actually less advanced than human science in many ways. The Zephyrians had better materials and more powerful energy sources, but they were not very creative. They built the same kinds of ships and weapons their ancestors had used for hundreds of years. They had never learned to adapt and change the way humans did. This lack of flexibility had been one of the main reasons they lost the war. General Rick Hayes stood before the United Earth Council to give his final report on the Zephyrian invasion. Rick was tired after months of planning and fighting, but he was also proud of what humanity had accomplished. The council members listened carefully as he explained how the war had been won. Rick told them that the Zephyrian Empire had crossed into human space, believing they were superior to any species they might find. Their arrogance had blinded them to the truth about humanity. They thought humans were weak because they had small ships and simple weapons. They never realized that human strength came from intelligence and creativity, not from raw power. The general explained that humanity's greatest advantage had always been the ability to learn and adapt. When faced with a stronger enemy, humans found ways to fight smarter instead of harder. They used stealth and psychology in cyber warfare. They turned the enemy's own weapons against them. They refused to fight by the rules that had allowed the Zephyrians to conquer other species. The United Earth Council voted to keep the Zephyrian invasion secret from the general public. They decided that most people did not need to know how close humanity had come to being enslaved. Instead, they would use the knowledge gained from the war to prepare for future alien contacts. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian Empire waited for news from their Third Fleet. They expected reports of victory and new worlds added to their territory. Months passed with no word from Admiral Kethvar or his ships. The Empire sent scout vessels to investigate, but these ships never returned either. Eventually, the Zephyrian government decided that the region of space where their fleet had vanished was cursed or dangerous. They declared it forbidden territory and warned all their ships to stay away. The Empire never learned that their fleet had been destroyed by the primitive humans they had planned to enslave. Years passed, and the story of the vanished Third Fleet became a legend among Zephyrian spacers. Some said the fleet had been destroyed by a supernova. Others claimed they had discovered a new galaxy and decided to explore it instead of coming home. A few whispered that they had encountered something so terrible that talking about it was forbidden. Captain Jake Morrison continued to patrol the space around the human colonies in his old ship Independence. Jake had been one of the first humans to see the Zephyrian fleet, and he was determined to make sure no other alien empire would catch humanity unprepared. His sensors were much better now, and his ship carried weapons that could destroy alien battleships. Sometimes Jake would think about the war and wonder if other alien empires would try to invade human space. He hoped they would be smart enough to leave humanity alone. But if they were not smart, then they would learn the same lesson the Zephyrians had learned. The galaxy had apex predators, and they looked like ordinary humans. The message spread quietly, through the dark spaces between stars, whispered from one spacer to another in bars and trading posts across the galaxy. There was a region of space where mighty fleets went to die, a place where arrogant empires learned humility. A corner of the galaxy ruled by creatures that looked weak but fought like demons when threatened. The humans had sent their message to the universe. They looked primitive and peaceful, but they were neither. They were survivors who had climbed to the top of their world's food chain by being smarter and more adaptable than anything else that had ever lived. Any alien empire foolish enough to test them would vanish just like the Zephyrians had. Vanished in arrogance. Destroyed by their own pride. Lost in the darkness between stars where human patience waited for the next fool to cross the line.